Hi guys, welcome to another LivinginSAtv video. David Nicoleko here guys, and today we are going to Transnet event right here in Esalen Park in Kempton Park guys. Anything you want to mention, brother?
No, it's a very critical event. It's a Transnet corporate event. I'm happy that we are part of this, to listen to the bigger strategy, the policy moving forward. And I heard that also there's going to be some deals that are signed, today. So it's such an amazing, obviously, as a channel that we get to be part, of this, because it's very important, especially if we look at the importance of Transnet within the continent. So they are talking connecting Africa, and indeed that's what they are doing. And we are really hoping to, meet some interesting people, and if you are lucky, be able to, do some interviews with, the big bosses. Today is the big bosses day.
Yeah guys, so it's really big. It's the biggest event of the year. Again guys, stay tuned. So look at this. We are at Esalen Park, Transnet School of Rail. Look at this.
Today it's an early morning start for us, for me and David. We had to wake up early in the morning, to Kempton Park, but we had to do it. I think it's very important that we become part, of this very important Transnet Group event. It's called Connect Africa. As David has said, that it is the biggest, event for Transnet, for the year. So this is quite amazing that we are part of this. We are looking forward, to understanding the policy direction, the strategy, the group strategy, and we are really hoping to be able to learn more about some of the deals that we'll be signing, some of the most, important, partnerships that they will be forging. And we are here in this amazing building in Kempton Park. This is a Transnet, building, Esalen Park. I also know that it also doubles as a train. A college for, it's a college for train drivers. So it's such a beautiful building. If you look at the upkeep, of the building, this is such an amazing monumental building that we have here. And we are really, fortunate actually to be part of this. We are looking forward to meeting different, people here. I've seen that there are a lot of, financiers, as well, ITC, DBSA, and also the African, based financiers that's going to be joining us, today. If you look, name of the event is Connect Africa. It's happening on the 27th of September 2024, which is today. As we move in, to the main hall. So it's going to be a very interesting day, today, guys. So we're really hoping that you will be able to enjoy and to learn more about what's going to be happening today. So this is the main hall. Did you know, David, that Transnet got such a big space, such a big venue?
I knew about the school, but it's my first time here,
Isn't this amazing?
It is incredible. I think they're dropping a big event. It's going to be really big.
Yeah, I think for me it's important, to really showcase that the state parastatals, the state agencies having this kind of big spaces. I believe that this is part of their cost saving, as well, because they own the property, and they are hosting here. I mean, we always lament, the plunder, of, monies in these parastatals and all that. But for me, this is really commendable for Transnet to be able to do this in their own space. So today, guys, we're really looking forward to sharing as much, as possible, about the event, itself. There will be some very important, conversations that will be taking place. As you can see, the stage is set. Connect Africa, panel discussions that are going to be taking place with senior executives, group executives that actually will be part of this. So we're really privileged, guys, to be given this opportunity, to access this auspicious event. So this is how the setup is. And also, what I love about this kind of setup actually is geared towards people when they are sitting in a table, you'll be able to converse, with one another. So it's not your typical just schoolroom setup that we normally find in this conferences, but we will be able to really network, do proper networking.
This is literally a first world event, we can say that.
Sort of what you expect.
Yeah, of course.
Contrary to people what they believe that we don't know how to do things in SA.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's a standard that we ought to expect. Because it's a country, it's a very powerful country. People need to understand that. And for me, this is a Transnet, event. A big corporate. It's a big agency, a big state parastatal, in SA, and in the African continent, itself. So therefore, I'm expecting this kind of level, So we need to get accustomed, to this. So we are hoping that we'll be able then to access more and be able to even access, the executive themselves. Because we would like them to articulate, some of their strategic, policies, so that people can be able to understand. I mean, if you look at the channel, we speak to the international audience as well. So I think it would be important that they get to hear, so to speak, from the horse's mouth. So I'm happy that it's a corporate event, a Transnet corporate event. So we get to interact obviously with the senior executives within the parastatal.
Yeah. At the end of the day, this is to bring investment. Okay, so every person that comes to the event gets a bag like this. Let me show you guys what we have here. So this is basically to show you guys the schedule of the event itself. Very professional, I must say. This is how we do things in South Africa. Okay, next. Thanks so much, brother. So we're gonna open this, and then we have a notebook and a ballpoint pen. Quality with the event, very well thought. Okay guys, there you go. Let's see the event. Let's learn a lot today. And again guys, stay tuned and make sure you share this amazing video.
Of this nation, connecting producers to markets. Across thousands of kilometers of railway track, from concept to completion, we manufacture, assemble and maintain the engine that drives the region's economy. With over 1,200 trains running every single day, we are the heartbeat of the land. Our ports are the lifeblood of the economy, ensuring the seamless flow of goods in and out of the country. Through cutting-edge technology, we link South Africa with global trade. From refineries to petrol stations, our pipelines secure the vital energy that fuels every step of progress, every new dawn, and every journey. We set foundations for industries and create spaces where businesses prosper. Transnet, enabling industry collaborations, facilitating trade opportunities, and driving economic growth. When Transnet works, South Africa thrives. Collaboration, opportunities, growth. Growing the future together.
We'd like to extend a special welcome to the key sponsors who've made this Connecting Africa conference possible. A big welcome to the African Development Bank. Special recognition to the Vice President of the AFDB, Mr. Solomon Kano, who's with us here this morning. A special welcome to the Africa Finance Corporation, to the Vice President at the AFC, Mr. Ona Kanza. Thank you for being here, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, of course, we've got representatives from the DBSA, the Development Bank of Southern Africa. A special welcome to the group executives who are here with us, Madam Catherine Kaufman, as well as Mr. Mohale Rachete. Thank you very much for being here. And of course, to our hosts this morning, to the Transnet Group Chief Executive Advocate Michelle Phillips and her Executive Committee. Thank you so much for having us. Ladies and gentlemen, to all the leaders in the private sector, to all the representatives in the public sector, and of course to my colleagues in the strategic communications and media spaces, a very warm welcome to you.
But before we proceed with the exciting agenda for today, let me quickly give you a safety brief, just to ensure that everyone can experience a safe and enjoyable conference today. For emergency exit, please take note of the demarcated exit with clear labeling at the back of the venue and on the side. Our safety marshals are on standby on each side in case of emergency. They will
Connecting Africa Conference, which Transnet is hosting for the second time. The theme of this year's conference, Building Africa Together, focuses on the importance of building an integrated regional freight and logistics system, which plays a crucial role in Africa's economic development and global competitiveness through an enhanced trade and improved connectivity. This conference is premised on the increasing recognition to collaborate with various role players to unlock the continent in terms of investment, expedite reforms, and unlock bottlenecks within the freight and logistics value chain across the entire continent.
But I wanted to start off really about talking about the strategic partnership that the African Development Bank has had with Transnet over the years. 2 years ago, in this same venue, Transnet successfully co-organized with the African Development Bank Group what was called the Transnet's Focus Africa Conference on 23rd September 2022, which brought together all key actors on the continent to discuss short, medium, and long-term joint development plans that are critical to developing the building blocks for Africa's integrated regional freight systems. So 2 years later, in the same venue, we're gathering for an even more ambitious team, which is Building Africa Together. Since 2010, Transnet has been a strategic partner for the AFDB. This partnership began with the bank's first corporate loan of $400 million to Transnet, and we followed up in December 2014 with another corporate loan of $250 million. And this was to support Transnet's 7-year capital expenditure program from 2013 to 2020. Today, we will be signing the third corporate loan, valued at about 19 billion rands, the equivalent of $1 billion, to support Transnet's recovery plan and the ambitious reforms on freight and logistics and open access on railways. This new loan demonstrates that the AFDB is a strategic partner to Transnet in both good and difficult times. Today's theme is quite important, Building Africa Together, and it's also in full alignment with the continental vision aiming to foster regional cooperation and integration in support of the African Union's Vision 2063, the African Continental Free Trade Area, as TP eloquently articulated, and the United Nations SDGs. It's also aligned with the AFDB's newly launched 10-year strategy, in which our strategic high-five priorities remain very relevant. I assume that a lot of people know about it, but maybe that assumption is not right. So it's to light up and power Africa, it's to feed Africa, it's to industrialize Africa, it's to integrate Africa, and lastly, to improve the quality of life of all Africans. But But given that we're talking about infrastructure, let me touch on the context for the development and rehabilitation of Africa's infrastructure. You've probably heard several statistics, but we at the AFDB estimate that the continent needs $130 to $170 billion a year to finance its infrastructure needs. However, after you look at ODA, private sources, and other sources, there is a gap of between $70 to $110 billion a year. And we need to think through how we're going to really meet that gap. We at AFDB have invested about $44 billion in the past 10 years in terms of transformational national and cross-border roads, railways, ports, aviation networks, in addition to supporting initiatives aimed at strengthening planning, policy reforms, and sustainable implementation of transport projects in Africa. A lot of times we only think about financing, but without appropriate planning, without appropriate strategies, without appropriate consultations, and doing that really on a regional basis, we end up with fragmented networks that are not optimal in total. So, we also know that in South Africa, the freight logistics sector accounts for 20% of the country's GDP, playing a pivotal role in connecting domestic industries and facilitating trade with global markets. Its significance extends beyond national borders, serving as a critical gateway for landlocked countries within the SADC region that rely on South Africa's ports and rail infrastructure for imports and exports. So, investing in sustainable, efficient transport infrastructure is essential to promoting economic growth and social inclusion and progress. So as we build Africa together, we need to harness private sector participation. So for example, the full implementation of open access in South Africa's logistics sector will play a crucial role in supporting the broader vision of building Africa together. By allowing multiple operators access to key rail and port infrastructure, Transnet can foster greater collaboration between public and private entities, ensuring that all stakeholders, whether from government, industry, regulation, or civil society, work together to optimize the country's logistics capabilities. The inclusion of private sector partners in managing and operating public assets also brings much needed expertise, innovation, better services, and also capital on an efficient basis to revitalize the infrastructure that is vital to both national and regional trade.
2 years ago, Transnet hosted its first Africa Connect conference titled The Future Africa Wants. It was attended by over 170 delegates from across the continent, co-sponsored by the African Development Bank. The conference's key takeaways included, but were not limited to, the need to provide reliable rolling stock within the region and the continent, the importance of ensuring coordinated planning between various railways authorities to aid seamless movement of cargo within the corridors, the creation of a complementary port system, including creating soft borders, removal of red tape, and other impediments. We spoke about the adoption of an integrated approval system across the different corridors, including digital IT systems and single points for submission of documentation for the processing of cargo. Access to DFIs, funding to cover project preparation costs in the development of logistics solutions, including the provision of export credit insurance. Regional integration remains integral to the economic development and growth of our respective economies. However, integration and trade amongst our respective trading corridors remains highly fragmented. It can be said that Africa has in fact integrated with the rest of the world faster than with itself. Cross-border production networks that have been a salient feature of development in other regions are yet to materialize in Africa. The reasons for this are complex and varied, with the absence of efficient and effective trade corridors being amongst the key factors. Gaps within the continent's infrastructure are constantly cited as a major challenge to attracting business and investment. Hence, the private sector participation and capital is vital in overcoming our infrastructure hurdles, especially in light of the budgetary constraints faced by so many of our governments. A robust transportation infrastructure is a critical enabler of African development and progress as it enhances trade and economic integration. Investment in infrastructure delivery has the catalytic potential to create a virtuous cycle of industrialization, job creation, and intra-regional trade. We need to deepen our understanding of our economies and the constraints faced by the industries in trying to access markets. At the same time, we need to be bold about our industrialization potential and develop long-term infrastructure plans to realize this potential. This will allow us to undertake more targeted interventions along critically identified corridors. Investments in modern rail and port infrastructure unlock economic potential and contributes to a more interconnected continent. The quality of transportation and logistics infrastructure has a positive impact on trade flows and bolsters efforts to create a larger and more unified market. The industry, together with development finance institutions, need to continue to play an enabling role in the development of Africa's transportation infrastructure.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you today. My name is Adonia Wilcox. I work with the Africa Finance Corporation, and I'll be presenting a State of Infrastructure report on behalf of our CEO. So I think a perfect place to start would be on the next slide, the objectives of the report and what it's trying to achieve. So we set out to prepare this report to take a look at the trends and the gaps and the requirements of the African infrastructure landscape. It's very well spoken about, the 100 billion or more of deficit that exists on the continent. But we felt that there was also a need to take a closer look at the trends and where exactly those opportunities were to close this gap. And it's with this in mind that we've begun preparing this presentation, and it's supposed to take place every year on behalf of the continent, if you will. So to start, I think it makes sense to spend a bit of time on the macroeconomic context in which Africa finds itself. African governments across the continent are grappling with formidable challenges, which in turn are straining their ability to finance infrastructure that's much needed on the continent. Laying on that is the intrinsic pull between social infrastructure and hard infrastructure and the need to invest in things like healthcare, education, and spending. So we think, or we feel, it's very much imperative that the private sector begins to play a bigger role, or an even bigger role in the continent's infrastructure funding. And two things really bring this point out. The first of which is an increasing debt burden or level of debt within the system on account of multiple shocks which have forced governments to spend a bit more on infrastructure, one, but two, intervening to stabilize the economies, is growing or pushing debt levels higher, and resulting from that is an increasing strain from debt servicing burdens. As you can see on the charts, we've seen debt on a sustainable basis has grown from 2012 to 2022 on account of COVID, and is scheduled to stay at high levels going forward. On top of that is the long-run issues of domestic or resource mobilization by governments to fund, I would say, activities and investments in things like infrastructure and social spending. And that we see as very limited, and will continue to remain limited for a while. So that also further drives the point of private sector participation in infrastructure funding. And we see that post-COVID, the environment is significantly limiting for governments to continue to finance infrastructure on the scale at which it needs to be financed on the continent. And with that in mind, we've tried to set out some examples of this. One is the overall fiscal balances we see growing and remaining high post-COVID, and that's quite shown in the chart. And to cap this off, or to cap off the context, is an overview of how Africa's stock or infrastructure stock has not kept pace with the requirements needed and continues to struggle. So we see Africa's capital stock accumulation has more or less stagnated over the past 3 decades, growing at about 2 to 4% compared to a region or a country like China, which is growing at much higher, as you can see on the first chart. And that has resulted in Africa lagging behind other regions across the world. The middle chart tries to show the stock compared to Africa's, right? And we see for East Asia, we've gone from having an infrastructure stock that was 4.7 times more than Africa to now being 9.6 times more. Latin America and the Caribbean also trends above Africa, growing from 1.5, opening the gap up to 2.15 times. And then more dramatically, we see China having gone from a lower capital stock base compared to the continent, now outstripping and growing much faster and much quicker, landing at about 6 times the stock of Africa. But that's not to say we haven't grown. The infrastructure stock on the continent has grown, just not at the pace that it needs to. And the last chart here tries to basically represent that graphically. As you can see, we've more or less had a flat growth, I would say, compared to other regions which are almost growing exponentially. And that just drives home the point that a new type of thinking is needed to close this gap. And we feel strongly that development banks on the continent, as well as the private sector, have to play a bigger role to step in to fill the gap that will inevitably be left by the governments. So given the nature of the conference, we thought it would be wise to spend some time on what we see evolving in the transport and logistics side of things and the opportunities there. So it's a mixed story really from where we sit. And we look at this across 4 key segments. On the port side, we see strong investment flows. As you can see, Africa has attracted some of the largest private sector flows into the port sector compared to other regions. And African ports have seen the highest private sector participation globally over the past decade, while the rest of the logistics sectors tend to struggle a bit, and that has several consequences which we'll highlight subsequently. In the railway space as well, that has also sort of reflected in the sense that the continent is not able to attract the level of investments it needs, or more investments required to close the large gap that exists there compared to other regions. Transportation for the continent as it currently exists today. And roads play a critical role for Africa. They move about 90% of people traffic and about roughly 80% by our estimate of goods. Above average, right? South Africa being one of them, Botswana, Egypt. And those are the countries where we see an efficient transportation infrastructure systems. Above average, right? South Africa being one of them, Botswana, Egypt. And those are the countries where we see an efficient transportation infrastructure systems. Slide is we've tried to just give a rough estimate of what's required to close this gap.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Mr. from LivinginSAtv. So we cover infrastructure projects, developments within South Africa. So I just want to ask, there's a very interesting piece of statistics that you covered here. When you say that there's a huge investment in ports by the private sector, but rail, roads, and airports have experienced less. Is it policy? What in your view, what is the challenge? Why are we not attracting more investors in these sectors?
So I think I'll just work as they came. So on the first question, we did drill down on this quite a bit. And I think the thing that stood out to us was the ports seem to be the more, sorry for using a simplistic term, easier sector to attack from a private sector perspective, right? There's a long track record of successful PPPs in the port space, and we feel private sector capital is just more able to take or digest the risks in those in that space compared to more challenging areas. And again, it varies across markets. So if you're looking West Africa, you're seeing a more tricky or a trickier road PPP frameworks, right? We haven't had many successes there, or in recent times. Versus ports which tend to be easier for private sector to digest all around. I think if permission, I'll group the last two together. And in terms of the public-private sector models we're seeing in the rail space, one we're seeing quite a bit happening in the Lobito corridor, the first phase and the second phase, and I believe FDB is playing a major role in the Lobito 2 corridor, so there is some precedence in the making, we think. AFC is also participating in that as a developer of the project, so we do think there is a sort of viable path to making a PPP successes in the rail sector. And on the question of
for future competitiveness, but more importantly, what is the role of the private sector in all of this? Okay, and thank you and good morning everyone that is here on protocol observed. I heard that was quite a long protocol. Let me just say a protocol observed, and thank you so much for the opportunity to come and share the perspective on Transnet's strategy, but more so the private sector participation. I have to say that there are a number of statements. We are on the news every day about Transnet, the state of our organization. You will hear statements like any improvement or significant improvement in Transnet will result in about 5% increase in GDP. Yep. There's 200 billion required to reinstate our assets. We hear statements of pronouncement that there are job losses in some of the mines attributed to our performance. We also hear that there's probably more than 50 million tons that is on the road, which is supposed to be on rail. Yeah. Most of it is quite true. We can debate the figures and the numbers, etc. But what we take out of it is that we need to improve the current performance at Transnet, which is because we've seriously lost quite a number of volumes, both on rail but also from the terminals perspective, ports and terminals now going via other routes other than our ports. So that's what we take out of it. And that is the key focus of our recovery plan. That's the first part of it. And it's in the significant areas of the economy, the mining, the agriculture, and the manufacturing, the areas that we really need to intervene in. There are a number of growth opportunities which I'm going to talk to. Then the second part is not just to fix for the sake of restating the status quo. Yeah. These sectors need to grow, the economy needs to grow. And that in most instances will require significant capital investments, which it's not a secret, our financial position does not allow us at this point in time to have such significant investment through our balance sheet. So therefore we cannot
do it alone. And that is where we see the role of private sector, which we had identified not now, when we were building this strategy, even 2 or 3 years ago. We said, let's bring in the private sector to help us with the recovery plan, and we've seen some significant achievements. We are working with the private sector in the areas of security measures in our lines, procurement, deployment of critical equipment in our ports to improve the efficiencies where we can. But as indicated, we do need the private sector in terms of capital investments, where we need serious capital investment, particularly to grow capacity in our value chain, be it rail or as well as ports and terminals. But also the know-how, things have changed on how logistics used to work previously to the modernizations that we have to consider, particularly for the terminals. That's the area where we see private sector benefiting us. And also access to markets. In some instances, there's particularly for they are controlled, some of the routes are controlled by the shipping lines. So you have to think of partnerships to also open up access to market and close the gap. The value chain is quite wide. There are areas where we are good at Transnet, but there are areas where other players can do it better. So in a nutshell, that is how we are bringing in private sector into our strategy.
Dr. Osa, thank you very much. I mean, you've also spoken to the second question which I wanted to bring to you, which was, what are the opportunities? And I think you've done an excellent job of outlining that. But I do want to go back to, you spoke about a number of headlines that are coming up. One headline that you didn't speak about is the headline that says, this is the privatization of Transnet. So let's clarify that. Is this the privatization of Transnet?
It depends. For some people, it's semantics. Privatization or private sector collaboration. Probably I'm not going to go into that, but maybe just explain a bit better our intent. Our intent is not necessarily to take all our assets into private sector, but remain active as much as possible in the operations of the business. So that is how we have sort of defined it. Because some people say as long as someone is taking a stake in your business, that's privatization. It might be partial privatization or what's not. But some cases in South Africa of full privatization would be the areas like ESCO, Telkom, where we know the state has fully divested or has little or less equity in those businesses. But our intent is to retain as much as possible and be still key role players without really losing our fabric as Transnet in the operations. But also there are a number of collaborations. It's not just private. It's not just equity. There are management and contracts. There are concessions. I'm also happy that Dr. Solomon in his remarks spoke about financing. There's also collaboration. The DFIs and similar institutions bringing alternative financing measures for the infrastructure. So it's not just equity.
I'm keen to move to Mr. Kape, but before I go there, I don't want us to miss some significant points that you've made. You've highlighted mining, agriculture, and manufacturing as some of the sectors that are top of the radar. You've spoken to the opportunities around, security, procurement, deployment, capital, know-how in terms of logistics, access to markets, a value chain that is wide and where there's opportunities for everyone to come in and optimize with their strengths. I suppose where I'm going with this question is, what is the thinking around how will you identify your strategic partners as you think about really bringing these PSPs to life?
And I have to admit, having worked on a number of them, they're very complex and requires quite a robust process to deal with them. We've had learnings for days, which we can share some other time. Yeah, but what we have done, and also we are a regulated entity as an SOE, so we have to comply with the number, we have to jump the number of hoops and loops, just to protect the integrity of the process, not just for the sake of it. So what we have done is we have developed what we call a joint investment and external partner selection framework as Transnet approved by board, which outlines how we partner to protect the process. And the intention really is just to ensure that there is a good reason for the private sector player. There's a value creation for Transnet, for our customers. There's no impact on Transnet as a group. So there are detailed financial models and business cases and optioneering, different options that are done to get to those decisions. But there are due diligence processes that needs to be done on potential partners, identifying all possible legal and reputational risks. So that is what we use as our framework. But we also learn, as we work with the institutions like AFDB, IDC, DBSA, they've been doing these things for quite some time. They also share how we can do it best.
Thank you very much. And I think it makes a lot of sense to hear you speaking to how those guardrails allow everybody to be focused on the same intent, which is of course value addition at the end of the day. Mr. Mashaka, let me bring you into the conversation, because oftentimes when we change how we engage with the external environment, it also sometimes means there needs to be an internal reconfiguration to ensure that we are fit for purpose to do that. So my question to you is, from an organizational architecture perspective, what are some of the changes that Transnet has either already started with or is planning to undergo to ensure that you're able to meet the demand of private sector participation?
Thank you very much. I will talk to two things. Perhaps from a group point of view, as Mondo has already indicated, there is a committee, for instance, internal committee that looks into the PSPs and sort of look at how we can take them and move them forward, whether they meet the criteria that we have established through the GX process that is referred to ensure that, and obviously in this life, everybody feels entitled to partner with especially state-owned companies, and they can complain about many things, but we need to go deep to check whether they qualify in line with our requirements.
Right.
And there's that then committee that is looking into that from a group point of view. And also, from a TP or transit property point of view, what we do is we said we cannot put out everything and call it a PSP.
Right.
What are those opportunities or those frameworks that we can put in place to say this is what from a TP point of view we're going to look at? And for instance, we said we were looking at it from two spheres. One is development leases. Now, we will put into the market development leases opportunities where third parties can come in and apply, and we will advertise. And the third parties or the private sector can apply to lease some of our properties in a long term.
Sure.
But then there is a process, organizationally, to ensure that the development leases are adjudicated in a different way, not like the normal leases. Then we've got what we call a Swiss challenge, or commonly known as Swiss challenge. It's an alternative method also of procurement, wherein you have people that before you go out to the market, they have already identified certain opportunities and they come to you and give you unsolicited bids.
Right.
How then do you adjudicate unsolicited bids? These are some of the things that previously, before the PSP framework was introduced, we did not have. Now we brought them into the table to make sure that we have a sort of uniformity, but at the same time an open and fair process that can be properly audited to ensure that it achieves what we want to achieve.
So I'm certainly learning new things today. A Swiss challenge. I've never heard about that before, but such an interesting way of ensuring that blind spots that we might have internally of not being able to see those opportunities in the value chain, that we create a pathway for others to come with unsolicited bids to say, herein lies an opportunity that we've seen. And of course, as you're speaking about an internal committee that has been empowered to really look at who qualifies and what exactly qualifies as a PSP, because this is not a catch-all, if I'm hearing you correctly. Before I move on to Madam Kani, just a final question. In light of everything that you've shared with me, Mr. Patsamohlaka, from a Transnet Properties perspective, what are the low-hanging fruit, immediate opportunities that you can see to say, well, this is certainly where we can expect an accelerated participation of the private sector?
We have identified and got board to approve 30 properties throughout the country, land opportunities that we are taking out to the market. I think that is a few months ago when they approved, we already had about 6 of them in the market, advertised, and they are in different stages of adjudication. But our target is to get all these 30 out into the market. That is pure development leases, long-term leases, 25 plus leases, wherein a third party would come with their proposals that will meet the requirements and the needs of Transnet operations, and then we partner with them through that period. And secondly, we have also identified about 22 other, what we call pure PSPs.
Yes.
Now, in these ones, now the difference between the 30 and the 22 is that the 30 will give you a long-term lease when you develop what you want to develop and you pay as a renter. When that period ends, then the property, the land and the development reverts to Transnet.
Okay.
Now, we have not sold Transnet properties, contrary to popular belief that we are privatizing it.
Yeah.
They still remain in the ownership of Transnet. And the 22 is where Transnet and third parties will partner in equity.
Gotcha.
And Transnet will put in the land and or the property as a contribution towards the structure. And SPV will be created, owned by both parties. We leverage on the private sector's ability to raise funding, to bring in development management expertise, and continuous day-to-day management of the property. And that one is ownership in perpetuity.
Thank you very much. And listening to the pipeline really sounds like not only is a lot of work that's undergoing, but there's a lot of opportunity that's opening up. And I thank you for also clarifying the difference between the 30 and the 22, because I think part of this conversation is to bring light to a lot of questions or statements that we might not have had the clarity on. So let me then bring yourself, Madam Kani, into the conversation, because as Mr. Patsamohlaka talks about long-term leases versus equity configurations and arrangements, it brings LeaseCo into the spotlight. What is LeaseCo? How did the idea or the concept of LeaseCo come about, and what is going to be the impact of LeaseCo?
Thank you, Nosipo. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Abwaba. Good question. And when Dr. Kino spoke about the interest that they have in the development of the LeaseCo, my mind went, Mr. Kino, exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Contrary to popular belief, the conceptualization of our LeaseCo had nothing to do with the rail reform. No. It was at the back of the studies that were done on the North-South corridor. I mean, it was the World Bank together with the NEPAD Foundation that they had done various studies just to get to the nub of what is it that can be done to unlock that corridor for its true potential. A couple of things came out of that. There's obviously the conditions of the various infrastructure networks across the 8 countries. There was also the fragmented approach to the customers. But most importantly, which we thought was a very low-hanging fruit, was the absence of rolling stock to cater for that demand. And I say this all the time, with the infrastructure in its current state, that corridor does less than 500,000 tons, and it could double in its current state without fixing anything. So we then looked at what then can be done with the corridor to enable it to reach its full potential, and that's when we conceptualized the idea of ring-fencing rolling stock specifically for the corridor. We engaged the 5 railway authorities in the 6 countries, and we all came to one conclusion that the quickest thing we can do is to drive the volumes on the corridor. That would then strengthen, not too much, but it will certainly strengthen the constrained balance sheets of the 5 countries. And then with time, you start raising the capital at the back of the revenues and the take-or-pay from the mining customers to then look into the infrastructure. And again, if I may add, the very same studies, what came out of that is that the projected demand on the corridor by 2030 is sitting at 16 million tons per annum. And this is at the back of the Africa Free Trade Agreement. That's number one. Further to that, we then did a calculation where we thought if we were to get to 60 million tons by 2030, you would need about 30,000 wagons for that corridor alone. So that's the X we're solving for at NOSIPO. What the rail reform did, it then expanded the market to the domestic market. And to Nondo's point, she's saying there's 50 million tons that cannot be accounted for on the rail network, and that is what it is unleashed over and above the 6 million tons that we are talking about in 2030. So what do we have in mind? We know for a fact, and Nondo has touched on this, is that the game changer for intra-Africa trade is the migration of cargo from road to rail. We do have a surplus fleet that is currently parked, which is what we call our B fleet, which is obviously not our new generation. And the idea is to use that B fleet and get into a joint venture partnership with a private sector partner. Yeah. And all that we're looking for from this private sector partner obviously is capital to refurbish. Yes. We're looking for skills in terms of running a lease company. We are in the business of leasing a rolling stock. We have a relationship with Zambia, Zimbabwe, and in some cases we sell it. But I think a private sector partner that has extensive experience in that regard would also add to the experience that we have. But most importantly, we're also looking for agility. When you procure as government, there are 2 things that stand against you. Yeah. It's the hoops and the loops that you have to jump because of the PPFA, one. Yeah. And secondly, the cost of procuring as government is far more expensive than private sector. So essentially, we're looking for those 3 things, and we are hoping that all things being equal, because right now we're in the process of developing a bankable feasibility study. Towards the end of the year, December, January, we'll then go out to the market to then invite whoever has the know-how and the capabilities to join us as a partner.
And I think what you've shared is just really incredible, because what you've also done is you've not only spoken about USCO, but the impact of the regulation, the change in the regulatory environment, and what that's done. So I'm not going to double click on that. Where I want to go is to perhaps ask you, what are the lessons that Transnet is carrying forward, mindful of the fact that private sector participation has not been new? What have we learned from previous attempts, and how are we leveraging those lessons to really make sure that this PSP strategy is absolutely optimized and really delivers on Transnet's mandate?
Yeah. Look, sometimes, I suppose we have to sometimes get out of our box and understand what the market wants, not what we want. Because that's when we get non-responsive bids. The first thing we've had to do is to just take a step back and look at what is it that the market wants, where are the gaps, but most importantly, what role do we want to play in this? I mean, I'm not shy to say that Transnet has got a vast technical experience, but we are challenged financially. So that's not our strength in this particular relationship. Those are the most important things for us, but just to understand what we're bringing to the table. But most importantly as well, just to better understand what we're solving for. I've spoken to the numbers, we've been verifying them. But I mean, we're not the only ones that would want to play in that space, I suppose, because what the rail reform does, it will open an opportunity for other private sector companies to play in the space of being train operators on the very same network that is currently being run by TFR.
understanding clearly what the market wants, and of course I don't want to miss your earlier point that I want to underscore the agility and the ability to unlock or make use of the opportunity in the lifetime of the opportunity, and I think that's really important in what you've highlighted. So Mr. Munyang, let me come to you. I'm going to put a few questions to you, then I'm going to open it up to the audience so that we can just get a little bit of engagement, get some questions and reaction to some of what we've heard here on stage. From a Chief Information Officer perspective, I want to go back to, I think it was Mr. Kano who spoke about, we need to be rethinking the integration of regional corridors and the extent to which they can carry fiber, as an example. The question to you is, how will the private sector participate in the fiber PSP, and in your view, what role do you expect them to play?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, from where I see it, when we talk about the concept of Connecting Africa, the starting point should be a traditional one, where it says you cannot appease the gods, if you don't have the first born and the last born. So
let's just repeat that. I feel like we're going to miss that. You cannot appease the gods unless you have the firstborn and the lastborn. So unpack, what does that mean?
Yes. So what I'm trying to say in this concept is, last year this concept of this conference didn't go well because there was no concept about connecting in terms of using fiber or any ICT. So this year they realized that they need the enabler, which is fiber. So fiber is very important to realize the goal of Connecting Africa. So what we are saying now here is, in this concept, we need the private sector, in the sense that Transnet as a whole has realized the importance of making sure that we invest in fiber. And we've made huge amounts of investments to the extent that where we sit now, we are realizing that we are only using 55% of what has been invested on the ground.
Sure.
So we're now saying that the private sector has got the ways and the means in which they can enable us to realize our goals. And secondly, we are also realizing the fact that the fiber that we have now, which is very important in terms of providing connection, has already reached the 50% closer to end of life.
Sure.
So we need lots of money to invest into upgrading this fiber infrastructure that we have. And we can only achieve this with the help of the private sector. And then maybe perhaps just to go back to the question that you raised earlier on in terms of, are you privatizing?
Yes.
We had so many questions from the private sector and even from the public where they were saying, are you really selling the state's assets? Are you getting rid of it? So we are not. What we are saying is we've got the assets, but the assets that we have are not fully used.
Yeah.
Even to the extent of making sure that we even support our own businesses. We are not able to do that because we need a massive lot of money to invest and to upgrade our infrastructure. So we need the public sector to come to the fore and assist us with operating these investments that we have. And we believe that the private sector, like for example in South Africa, if you look at the likes of Vodacom, MTN, and all of those big companies that are there, they've got experience and the know-how of operating the infrastructure.
Yeah.
For us, our daily job is not to operate infrastructure in a way that we can make revenue out of it. But we are saying that private sector know how to make revenue out of it. So come and help us. So our intention is to use the network to deliver services to our country.
So what I'm hearing you saying is fiber as an enabler, optimizing the assets that we have, pulling in and carving in the strengths of the private sector. But there's this language that the private sector speaks, and the language is called "What's in it for me?" And so I'm very keen to hear how you have thought about the narrative around how all of these, and especially some of the examples that you've raised with us, will be of benefit to the private sector, so that there is a real crowding in of private sector participation.
Yeah, one thing for them is very simple. We are saying that we've got connections in fiber on the ground from Johannesburg to Bloemfontein, Cape Town, Durban, across the country, right? So for them, it's going to be very expensive to start laying down the fiber. And then more so from the point that they don't even have the waves or right of ways for them to start laying down the fiber. But Transnet has already done that work for them.
Yes.
So when they come in there, For them, they're just coming in to activate the service and to upgrade the fiber, which then allows them a footprint, which can allow them to start selling services to their customers in areas where they don't have any coverage.
And it's absolutely, I mean, such a strong narrative that I've heard throughout the entire panel, and that is shared value is the common language that I'm hearing is being spoken. So I'd love to open up to the audience. I'd love to I'm taking questions. Comments are also welcome.
Thanks so much once again. LivinginSAtv. I think my question is Advocate Kape. As a channel, we are very much interested in the rejuvenation of the city of Johannesburg. And I'm happy that the Premier, in his 7th administration, he did quote a lot of your investments that you are actually making in that space. But the question is there any plan on your side, now that you are staying? Carlton Center, we know that is getting revived, to collaborate with other property owners within the sector, because we interact with a lot of them, and they seem to be a yearning to actually have a bit of an ear and engage with Transnet, because there's no way that you revive that building without looking at the entire node. And the investment that you have, it's a significant investment. In fact, it's one of those landmarks that have made Johannesburg what it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ngulego. It's a great question.
Thank you for the question. Definitely, we are talking to a number of other property players in the city of Johannesburg. One, we're talking to the province, we're talking to the city, but also over and above that, people that are adjoining our properties. We're talking to HDA as an example for the conversion of the hotel into apartments. Yesterday we had a meeting with the PIC as an example to look into bringing them into refurbishment of the Carlton Center. We are building the new head office of Transnet at 96 Resix Street. Transnet is putting there just under 600 million, if I may say so, to refurbish the building, 120-year-old building, into an A-grade office park, together with the parking. And there, we also took into Prasa, who is adjoining us, to ensure that the precinct itself, we're just not going to have one good building in an area and the others are not looking good. Now, that is what we are doing. We sold 2 of properties next door to the City of Johannesburg Property Company to convert them into, they were dilapidated, they're going to be converting them into residential apartments. Now, we are very much open to have discussions with all other participants in the CBD of Johannesburg to make sure that it does not only become our duty or our properties, but also everybody else. And then we joined a grouping called Josie My Josie. That is looking at the cleaning of the city of Johannesburg. And ensuring the roads are going to work, the traffic lights are going to work, and there's lighting in Johannesburg. Now we're trying to collaborate with everybody. We're meeting a next door owner, OPH, in the next 2-3 weeks, so that we can say to them, the streets of around Carlton Center must be clean. How do we make sure that it becomes safe, it becomes clean, it becomes light?
And such an iconic building, of course, in the skyline of what constitutes Johannesburg. Call on you to join us in the photograph. And then from the AFDB side, joining Mr. Kano, I'm going to ask Madame Leila Mukadem to please be on standby. Mr. Kennedy Begiani, Mr. Mike Salahu. I'm going to ask Mr. Zerfu Tesema to also please be on standby. Madame Tad Wada to please be on standby. Mr. Pointer Chiningere, Madame Acha Nono, and Mr. Muzi Kubeka to kindly please be on standby. As that photo moment is taking place, thank you very much. And I'm going to just, now may I ask all the names that I've called on to play.
1, 2, 3.
The level where I am standing as well.
Thank you.
Time to enjoy your tea and coffee. Let's allow the picture to be taken. Let's give a round of applause before we depart from the room. Let's give them a warm round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
More people are coming in.
Yeah.
Okay guys, we're done with this amazing event done by Transnet, and we must say thank you very much for Transnet to inviting us to come here to Esalen Park in Kempton Park, guys. And the event was amazing, very well organized, and we had a lot of stakeholders right here, guys. And then, what do you think, brother, how it was for you?
I think it surpassed my expectations. Sometimes when you attend, conferences, they tend to be talk shop.
Yeah.
I think for us as a channel, I'm happy with the kind of connection that we've done, especially with the state parastate house. And again, I want to commend Transnet in terms of time. I think we finished 30 minutes ahead of the program that they've given us. And I think we, as much as it might be just a small thing, but I think when it comes to the public sector, unfortunately, we tend to expect the West when we engage with them. But I'm just happy to see the great efficiency and also the dance of the information that was shared today. So there was sincerity, and we've heard about the pipelines, some of the policy directions that they are taking in various divisions. And I think today was even more critical that we're here because we get to know about various divisions of Transnet, what is their strategic focus, and hearing from the divisional heads, I think it really made things quite easy because you are hearing it from the horse's mouth. So challenges are there, but they can be overcome
because we're going to work together to finalize them and
most definitely
tackle them.
So for us, more than anything, is also to augment what they are doing and be able to showcase to the world the kind of work that we're doing in the country. So bravo to everyone who organized this event. It was well organized. So we're looking forward to next year because it's an annual event, and we are hoping that we're gonna be invited again next year. So guys, I hope you'll enjoy obviously what we're going to share with you, what we've learned. Obviously we couldn't cover everything due to the amount of information.
It was more than 8 hours.
Yeah, more than 8 hours.
It was like long.
We tried our best. I think you'll get the gist. I think we'll also be able to channel you to some of their official communication channels so that you are able, if you are interested in specific topics that have been covered, where you can be able to get them.
The whole event. Okay guys, make sure you share, subscribe.
I did my own conference here.
Share, subscribe, destroy that like button. We will see you in the next LivinginSAtv video.